Big question. Do I put out the big cash and, go into debt and buy a property somewhere? Or do I hang out in the urban environment? Sometimes this is a really big question for folks, especially our students. Sometimes the end goal for them is to get a piece of property. And in the meantime, they're not investing or flexing their design muscles on their own property. So, my strategy for today is really to focus on the urban environment and see how much abundance and resilience we can achieve through that. So in an urban environment, we've got plenty of opportunities for impactful action. You wouldn't believe how many people we get through our property every year, like sometimes over 200 come for permaculture tours or eco-yard tours. And when they're in that space, it affects them so profoundly. They want to go home and make a small change, even if it's a small change. And I think we underestimate the power of taking even small actions. And like Ben mentioned yesterday, if there's only one thing you take away from the summit this weekend, it's to take some kind of small action. We've got lots of opportunities in urban environments for leveraging diversity of skill sets that are readily available, diversity of all kinds of materials, including surplus materials, diversity of culture and, food culture, really important to me, diversity in, with the wisdom diversity, that wisdom bank. Plenty of opportunities to connect with that. And of course, in our growing systems, we would like to have plenty of diversity. Of course, there are many more ways to leverage diversity, but these are just a few. Also, diversity is available to us in the way that we source our food. We've got so many options for food sourcing in a city that don't require necessarily purchasing from a supermarket. Now you can see these circles going further and further out. Obviously, this home and community garden is the hyper-local model that helps us build resiliency in our backyard. If we can't grow everything in our own backyard, then maybe we look either to direct relationships with local producers, or we do like cooperative food buying clubs where we still have it's a little bit less centralized, but still a little bit of centralized. And then we've got the producers, local producers. So this is really about creating relationships, right? Relationships. And then we've also got farmers markets, which are a similar model. But there's so many options to buying from a supermarket. This is the most fragile. This is the most anti-fragile here. So leveraging that diversity of food sourcing options. Of course, shortening our food supply chain, super important. I'm sure many of you have seen similar slides to this one. And further away you move from this model here, the distance between garden to table, the more fragile your system is. So we've also got plenty of opportunities for fostering productive and resilient relationships and harmonious, supportive interconnections. So I'm just going to move my little box here so that I can see the rest of my slide. Okay, there we go. So the interconnectivity is a really important key, and it's something that exists in spades in urban environments. There's so many opportunities for connection and multiple connections, which actually build in that all-important piece of redundancy that we're looking for. Oops, what happened here? So remember I showed you this slide earlier, these centralized, decentralized, and distributed systems. So what if we could do something like this? This is a really anti-fragile, this is beyond resilient. This is an anti-fragile system where we've got hyper-local consumers and producers. So they are all connected with a whole bunch of people who aren't producers, but are definitely consumers, in a very hyper-localized fashion. So you can imagine with all these levels of connectivity, we've got this web. And you know how resilient a web is. And this is occurring on multiple levels, right? These are stacked matrices of relationships that go on and on and on and on and on. And the more of these connections you build on a hyper-local scale, the more anti-fragile your system is, the more it can weather the storm. So even in your own gardens. So this is an example of something that one of our students submitted, very similar to this. And I thought it was a very good illustration of how to create these multiple connections. So based on the needs and yields analysis, and if you've taken the PDC, you've seen this before, But if you haven't, this is a great exercise because it really shows you, how many ways you can use the resources on your own property, and understanding the needs of all of your given elements. These are only just a few of them in your system. You could see that you can get that same stacked matrices of relationships, and you're basically creating systems that are much more closed loop, right? That are much more resource efficient. And that's what we're really looking for. And this can be done on multiple scales with any type of organization or home garden or large scale agricultural process. So if we looked at this where organizations were doing that needs and yields multiple connectivity process within their own organizations, and then they created the same kind of network, multiple network with other organizations, school groups, community organizations, family groups. You can do this kind of exercise with absolutely everything, not just our food growing strategies, but all of our resource uses and all of our organizations, all of our social structures as well. And in so doing, we can build these more closed loop systems where we're meeting our needs locally and hyper locally. So we've got this strategy that I'd love to work on with my community. Of course, resilience is a big deal right now. And so I'd really like to create some sort of a skill bank in our own community where people come together and they willingly create basically a database of what our local skill sets are, right, in community. And I think that not only will create greater levels of connectivity, greater opportunities for people to get to know each other and to create connections, but also makes us a lot less fragile in case of any problems down the road. So we've got this idea of self-sufficiency that, we need to be the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. And that really implies that we have to produce everything ourselves and that we don't need any supplies or services from the outside. But really, in an urban environment, you can flip that on its head. You can say what about self-reliance? Self-reliance means I take responsibility for my own household needs, but as part of a local resilient community. So I don't have to I don't have to be the baker. I don't have to bake the bread. My neighbor is baking, 8 loaves a week and that's too much for them. And so I can purchase my bread from them, or someone else is making beautiful ferments, or my local neighbor is an electrician and I'm happy to trade my canned goods for an hour of his time. There's this wonderful opportunity to build a village economy, which is really, really key for building resilience in an urban environment. So of course, growing food is a big deal for us. This is our front driveway. This is part of our backyard system. I love to see when people are challenging the urban model and getting out there and growing food in their front yards, getting creative with growing food in small spaces. This is key. And I think when we do our open yard tours here, people come away with a whole bunch of ideas because we're using our yard also as a demonstration site for urban farm school students as well as the permaculture students. So we love to trial all different kinds of strategies here, and it allows people to go home and try different things and know that challenging the front yard landscape paradigm is a worthwhile endeavor. And I'll show you some pictures of ours in a little bit. This was our front yard. This is the property that I live in Calgary. It's a 2-story flat roofed house, which presents some challenges when it comes to rainwater harvesting. But this front yard, this is pretty well what my yard looked like when I bought the property 30 years ago. And we started to transition that right away at the time of purchase. The first thing I did is I built compost bins in the backyard and knew that if this was a resource that I could reinvest into my landscape. So it was a very basic yard, grass from stem to stern, front yard and backyard, of course. But this is my property here. So, really urban environment here. But we really, I really had a vision for this property. I knew that it was possible to build much more abundance and really make that connectivity, that connection with my property. We moved so much when I was a kid. It was difficult for us to actually put down roots. And And I knew when I found this property here in Calgary that this was going to be my home for a long time. And I wanted to get that sense of place. I really wanted to invest my time, my love, my energy, and my resources into creating a nurturing environment for myself and my family. So this is what our property basically looks like now, 30 years later. So with some minor shifts, you can see that's quite a difference between that and that. And basically this is all is incredibly productive, really beautiful, very nurturing, and it meets all of our needs as far as, as human, our what our needs are as human beings. We produce a ton of food. We have beautiful gathering spaces, lots of social spaces. We've got serenity zones where we can hang out and, hide away for a bit. We've got we've got lots of ecosystem health here, small greenhouse, lots of rainwater storage. It's so abundant right now. It's unbelievable. You wouldn't believe the harvest. I just finished doing all my canning, and I'm like overwhelmed. It's been so much this year, but there's so much productivity that one can produce off of an urban lot. And the permaculture design process is really a valuable design. It's a valuable tool to help us get from what I used to have to what I have today, and the level of productivity and ecosystem health and dynamics.
My dad's Danny doesn't fly.